So guys, I know this is very late in the evening, so thank you for still sticking around. I'll try to keep it as energetic and kind of as interactive as I can. Um, so we've talked about Bitcoin, and I know Roshan has been a huge supporter of Bitcoin since the very early days. Bitcoin's main goal was mostly to do payments, right? Transactions, cross-border especially. Then in 2015, we had Ethereum that came about where for the first time you have smart contract capabilities and the capabilities to build applications on top of a protocol. So that was a game changer in so many aspects. But today, and Roshan kind of alluded to this as well. So what's next, right? Like, we've had so many applications that have been built within the Ethereum ecosystem. Abhimanyu just talked about, the lack of usability of a lot of applications or the lack of user engagement. So how do you solve these problems? How do you bring, the next kind of 100,000 million, 10 million people into the ecosystem? How do you get large enterprises into the ecosystem? But before going into that, I want to start off with a very quick introduction about myself. So I got into crypto kind of late 2016, started buying crypto mostly from a speculative perspective. And then throughout 2017, invested in a bunch of projects. I was mostly involved from an investor perspective. And at the same time, I was trying to enter the venture capital industry, being based out of Singapore. The transition to moving into venture capital was not working out so well, but kind of by the end of 2017, my personal portfolio had done so well that I decided to move back from Singapore to India for about 6 months and stayed with my parents. During that time, I still wanted allocations to kind of different projects, but it was getting really, really difficult to get allocations or the opportunity to invest in a lot of projects. So I started a podcast called Decrypt Asia, which I was running until very, very recently, till I got super hectic. So Decrypt Asia was focused on building an ecosystem where I would interview Asian entrepreneurs, stakeholders like exchanges, stakeholders like regulators, law enforcement agencies, lawyers, who were working on trying to make the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry more user-friendly, drive more adoption to this particular industry. As part of that, I also started writing for Tech in Asia and things like that. All that led to me being the first and founding member of a crypto venture capital fund called Lunex Ventures. Lunex Ventures is the crypto arm of a traditional VC fund in Singapore called Golden Gate Ventures. Golden Gate Ventures has been investing in traditional startups for about 9 years, managed close to $200 million. They carved out a $10 million fund to invest in blockchain projects on the equity side, but also liquid tokens. So as part of that, I was involved in 7 deals, both on the equity side and the ICO side, as well as managing a portfolio of 10 to 12 liquid tokens. So I've seen multiple kind of projects evolve over the last 2-3 years. You would have, if you've been here since morning, you would have heard a lot about gaming, gambling, and DeFi as kind of the go-to applications. But my thought process, having looked at so many gaming, gambling, DeFi applications and so many entrepreneurs pitching to me while I was working at the venture capital fund, my thought process is that in order for the industry to reach the trillions of dollars, it has to be through the enterprise use case. How do you get pharmaceutical firms, commodity trading firms, social impact companies working on social impact causes, other for-profit companies in the supply chain, logistics sector to come into the industry? So that's the problem that we're trying to solve at Persistence. And Persistence is the enterprise hub of Cosmos, or the India hub. So I'll get into Persistence, but before getting into Persistence, what I want to talk about is why are we here in the first place, right? What is blockchain? For a lot of people, blockchain is a buzzword where a lot of middle managers or senior managers at larger enterprises think that it's going to be career saving for them. Or it's something where they think there is some level of innovation. And so they think that in order to keep up with kind of other companies or keep up with some of the younger startups, they have to kind of adopt blockchain. But I truly believe that blockchain has the potential to be a foundational technology. Now, what is a foundational technology? A foundational technology is one where the end consumer does not need to understand how the technology works. So the first technology in that aspect, in terms of being a foundational tech, was fire, right? So you don't need to know all the chemical reactions that are happening. All you need to know is how to light a fire and then get heat from it or use it for cooking. Similar with electricity. You don't need to know about how electricity is produced, how is it distributed. All you need to know is how to switch on a switch and switch off a switch. And the thing is, electricity would not exist if it wasn't for fire. If it wasn't for electricity, there would be no PCs. If it wasn't for PCs, there would be no internet. If it wasn't for internet, there would be no smartphones. And so what's next, right? So we've come over the last 3-4 decades. There's been so much tech innovation that has happened. What is next? So today, when we use smartphones, there is so much data that is being generated. There are IoT devices that are interacting with the internet on a real-time basis. So, I think it's already happening, but going forward, our fridges, our air conditioners, our toasters, every device that we use is going to be connected to the internet. And it's going to produce so many millions, billions, trillions points of data. And the biggest problem that's happening is, how do you prove that this data is accurate or the provenance is good? The data quality is high. And that's where the blockchain comes in. So in terms of that, in terms of how blockchain itself has evolved, I've talked a little bit about this, right? So we had Bitcoin, which was mostly for payments and transactions. Then for the first time, we had Ethereum for smart contracts in 2015. But today, you would have heard from multiple kind of blockchain platforms that exist. Whether it's Tezos, whether it's Blockstack, whether it's Matic, Ethereum. There are so many pure kind of cryptocurrencies, whether it's Dash, Ripple, Litecoin, Bitcoin. How do these interact with each other? So today you build an application in the Ethereum ecosystem, and you have another application in the Tezos ecosystem. How do they interact with each other? So till today, it hasn't been possible, and so that's the biggest problem that Cosmos solves, which is interoperability. And so they have developed, or in the process of developing, what they call the InterBlockchainCommunication protocol, which allows all the different cryptocurrencies and blockchains to come and be joined through Cosmos as a kind of central hub. And so this is something that Roshan has talked about, and I can see he's taking a picture of this particular slide. But in general, so what you want to do is you want Litecoin to be able to speak to Bitcoin, to be able to speak to Dash. And so these are pure cryptocurrencies, which then in turn speak to kind of smart contract platforms or protocols. So, applications like Ethereum. In general, what the framework that Cosmos has adopted is what they call a hub and spoke model. So you have different hubs. The first hub is the Cosmos hub itself. There is another hub in China called the Iris hub. And I'll be talking about persistence. Persistence is the enterprise-focused hub within the Cosmos ecosystem. So what we're trying to do is bring enterprise functionalities and capabilities and features into Cosmos. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but most of the cryptocurrencies that you see here are what you call kind of, they're permissionless or open networks. Anyone can join the ecosystem. You don't need anyone's permission to become a miner. You may need financial resources, but you don't need anyone's permission to become a miner. But one thing that we are leveraging on as far as Cosmos's capabilities go, how many of you know about Hyperledger? So a lot of enterprises today are implementing their use cases on platforms like Hyperledger, R3 Corda, Quorum, private implementations of Ethereum. The beautiful thing about Cosmos is that not only does it allow interoperability between two public chains, it also allows interoperability between public chains and private chains. So today, if an enterprise builds an application on Hyperledger, but they have to interact with another enterprise or another company that has built its application on Ethereum, for example, today there can be no interoperability. And so that is the biggest thing that Cosmos is trying to solve in terms of interoperability between public and private chains. So something that Cosmos has done fairly well is they've abstracted away the consensus and the networking layer at the Tendermint level. Has anyone heard of Tendermint here? Yeah. So Tendermint is a general purpose blockchain. There is no token at the Tendermint level. You can have very private implementations of Tendermint, and you can have Cosmos itself as one of the public implementations of Ethereum. What Cosmos has done really well is they've developed a toolkit which makes it very, very easy for developers to start deploying different applications. So, I've talked about interoperability. I think scalability is another thing that Tendermint offers. So, we've had proof of work as a very, very solid consensus mechanism. Ethereum, obviously, currently is on proof of work, but is trying to make that transition to proof of stake. But there are question marks in terms of how that transition is going to happen, right? There are question marks in terms of people don't know what's going to, so there are miners that have invested billions of dollars in terms of acquiring equipment, mining machines that is specifically used to mine Ethereum. What happens to the Ethereums? What happens to those miners? And so things like that are things that are huge question marks. So in general, what Cosmos is trying to do is address some of those basic issues. The scalability issue is solved by Tendermint at the consensus and networking layer. I've already spoken about interoperability. One thing that doesn't get talked about enough, right? So today we go to universities to do hackathons. First of all, most college and university students, blockchain is almost an afterthought for them. They all want to build AI and ML applications. The few developers that do want to build blockchain applications, they go on Google and the first thing that they see is Solidity. And so they think that they need to learn Solidity in order to start building applications. So Cosmos itself right now uses Golang, but in the future they're developing wrappers in terms of what they call Application Blockchain Interface, ABCI, which allows in the future, so it's not activated yet, but in the future you could literally have the flexibility to develop in whatever language you're comfortable with, but still deploy your applications. What I want to talk about next is the enterprise implementation of Cosmos and why Cosmos is a game changer as far as enterprise implementations go. So in the mid 90s, most large corporates said, there's this thing called the internet, and it's great for the nerds, but we're going to create our own implementation of the internet, which is the intranet, and we're going to control who enters this ecosystem, who leaves this ecosystem. But we've seen how that plays out, right? If you want true innovation, you need to create at least relatively more open and permissionless environments. So our belief is that similar to the transition from the intranet to the internet, and from having on-premises servers to the clouds, enterprise tech is going to move from private or permissioned blockchains like Hyperledger or Corda, Quorum, other private implementations of Ethereum to relatively more public implementations. So we don't think that they're going to overnight go into permissionless networks and have a bunch of validators or miners validate their transactions. But we believe that it's going to be a slow transition. And so what we're doing with persistence is, first of all, I think we have to ask is, why do enterprises build on Hyperledger, or why do they build on Corda? The thing is, they want to control the stakeholders that enter the ecosystem. They want to keep the transactions private. They want to keep the application business logic private. But what enterprises have also started realizing is that from a proof of concept perspective, it's great, right? So, if you are in the senior management and you need to show to your boss that you're using, blockchain technology because it's cool, it's been great. But when it comes to actual business case in terms of, growth of revenue or reduction of expenses, unless you're trying to, help grow the, top line or reduce expenses, there is actually no full-scale implementation of blockchain technology in a lot of cases. And why don't enterprises use, completely public blockchains? I mean, there's a few reasons for that, and I want to go into that as well. But essentially, what we are trying to do at Persistence is we're trying to use the interoperability features of Cosmos to create hybrid blockchain structures where we have kind of private public implementations. So we still have the privacy of what a private blockchain would offer, while still having distributed consensus in the background. But this distributed consensus through validators or miners is not done in an arbitrary manner. What I mean by that is not anyone can become a miner or validator in our ecosystem. So we have a certain criteria based on which we onboard validators or miners in our ecosystem, while still having them distributed around the world. So today, the biggest reasons why enterprises don't like using public chains, number one reason is there's a reluctance to hold tokens for a variety of reasons, right? Tokens are volatile, there's regulatory risk. Enterprises completely haven't figured out how to do custody or implement risk management procedures around multi-sig. One thing that keeps getting or doesn't get talked about enough is, if you're a large enterprise and you're going to do 1 million transactions in the following year, you have to pay gas, right? If I'm sitting in the finance department of a large enterprise and I'm tasked with finding out what the budget of gas is going to be for the next 1 year, I have no idea how much gas I need. And that is a big problem. Enterprises hate uncertainty. The second, I've kind of briefly talked about validators. So today, even within Cosmos, the threshold to become a Cosmos validator is about 1,000 atoms, about $4,000 allows you to become a Cosmos validator. But enterprises don't like that because these are non-KYC validators. In case the validators they double sign or they act maliciously, their tokens will be slashed, like how it would work in any POS DPoS chain. But what enterprises want is they want legal recourse. They want the ability to be able to go to the court of law in case something goes wrong. And then one other point that doesn't get talked about enough is infrastructure centralization. So today, people in POW networks, people talk about Bitcoin mining being centralized in China. In POS networks, if you guys have been following, there is geographical distribution of the validators, but all the validators are running in the cloud. And so there's infrastructure centralization. And so, a few months ago, Google Cloud went down and 5% of the Cosmos validators went down with it. So, these are some of the problems that we're trying to solve to make it more digestible and palatable for enterprises to start using this technology. So the validators in our ecosystem are some of the, I don't know if, these names ring a bell to you, but if you've seen any DPoS chains, so, whether it's Terra or Kava, some of the newer protocols that are coming about, right? So whether it's Neo protocol, Solana, these are some of the most well-known, most well-capitalized validators from around the world. So we have the biggest validator, Stake.fish, which is backed by Bit.fish, which is, I think, the largest or second largest Bitcoin mining pool as one of our validators. What all these validators have in common is, first of all, they have great reputations in the market. Secondly, they have huge assets under delegation. Because the validators in our ecosystem are validating real-world banking transactions, which are extremely high value in nature, we need these validators themselves to have huge assets under delegation so that the penalties for acting maliciously or double-signing transactions is huge. The third thing is, we require these validators to have physical servers with hardware security modules. So we don't let any validator run in the cloud. And I think qualitatively, one thing that we check is how much are they contributing to kind of open source code in the community. So we assembled this kind of rockstar set of validators that collectively manage $250 million. And we'll slowly keep adding validators to our ecosystem based on the criteria that I just outlined. Now, we've built this platform, but who's using it? So the biggest application, the marquee application in our ecosystem is a physical commodities marketplace called Comdex. Comdex is looks like a Web 2.0 kind of SaaS solution. It's web-based currently. So if you're the owner of a commodity trading organization, then you can create an account for yourself, create an account and password. We generate a public-private key pair in the background, but all those crypto things are abstracted away from the end user. What Comdex does is all the way from onboarding the commodity trading organization to giving different access rights to the employees of this organization in terms of what commodities they can trade, what values they can trade up to. Can someone initiate trades or execute trades as well? The second aspect of Comdex is a marketplace element for matching of buyers and sellers. And then finally for settlement, when the buyer has to pay the seller. Now in Comdex's case, because the target market of Comdex is global, because it's focused on physical commodities around the world, when the buyer has to pay the seller, in today's context, it's a T+2 or T+3 settlement. So it takes the banking transaction 2 or 3 days to settle, which is absolutely ridiculous in 2020, where all you're doing is updating ledgers. So what we've done is, we've come up with the mechanism. Initially, we wanted to use a stablecoin to settle these transactions. So that the buyers and sellers can actually settle the transactions quickly. But we realized that, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, in terms of why there is a reluctance to hold tokens. So we can't expect the commodity traders trading on Comdex to be holding even stable coins in their wallet. So we came up with the next best alternative where we work with non-banking financial institutions from around the world to settle transactions immediately. Similar to kind of how TransferWise works, where if you're transferring from London to India, they have float in London and in India, and they will just update their internal ledger without actual movement of money through the bank. So we've created this mechanism, but how do you know that Western Union itself, why should you trust Western Union with your money? How can you know that Western Union itself is not going bankrupt or belly up? And that's where the crypto aspect comes in, where at the commodity trader level, you're still interacting with kind of the traditional banking or financial infrastructure. You're getting instant settlement. And then how do you know that Western Union itself is not going belly up? Western Union broadcasts transactions to the different validators. So today what happens is, what are the miners or the validators doing? They're validating speculative crypto transactions. So, I'm transferring my ETH or my atoms from one wallet to another, exchange to wallet, wallet to exchange to exchange. And every transaction, the miners or the validators are getting paid. And most of these transactions, some transactions obviously may have some uses, but a lot of these transactions are literally for speculation. They're literally transactions that you are doing, but it's just that you have multiple wallets or you have your assets on different exchanges. What the validators in our ecosystem are doing are validating real-world banking transactions and getting a small fee, a small cut out of that. This is truly how I believe we get trillions of dollars of transactions into the ecosystem, and this is truly how the industry actually moves into the trillions of dollars. So this is what we're doing. The second company, and there are several other kind of enterprises, startups that are interfacing with enterprises and government agencies that we're working with us. These are usually the two examples we talk about. But IXO Foundation is another company that is trying to solve the problem of social impact bond trading, similar to trading of carbon credits. Now, they were working with a very well-known private bank. And this well-known private bank and the clients of this private bank did not want to deal with crypto or having crypto wallets and things like that as well. So we've integrated the mechanism that we have built in order to abstract away the token from the application layer while still having distributed consensus and incentivization, disincentivization in the background at the validator and protocol level. So this is, again, I think throughout the day, you would have heard multiple people talk about usability and scalability. How do you get users into the platform? What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring enterprises into the ecosystem by making sure that we make it extremely, extremely easy for them to abstract away tokens, engage with only the current banking infrastructure that exists, while still get all the benefits of having distributed consensus. So we're based in Bangalore now, and our company is called Persistence. Outside of Persistence, we're supporting the Cosmos community. The relationship between Cosmos and Persistence is that Persistence is trying to bring in, you can kind of say it like, we're trying to bring in the capabilities and the functionalities of Hyperledger into the Cosmos ecosystem. So you still get all the benefits and the features of what enterprises are used to, while still having distributed consensus in the background through a curated set of validators. So what we're trying to do is now bring more people into the Cosmos community as well. And yeah, I think so far it's been great in terms of our engagement with the different developers, the university students, but also in terms of our engagement with the enterprises and the government agencies. But yeah, this is what we've been working on. Please feel free to get in touch. I'm active on multiple platforms like Twitter, Telegram. This is our website.